Here at the Utah State Prison is now underway. We are told that the lethal injection should be administered at any minute. They will give us a 2-minute warning when they are ready to announce that that has been completed. This is Utah's first execution in 14 years. Taberon Honie was moved from an observation cell into an execution chamber just within the last half hour. Honie was sentenced to death in 1999 for the brutal murder of his ex-girlfriend's mother, Claudia Ben. His execution warrant was filed in June of this year after serving 25 years on death row. We have team coverage of everything taking place inside the prison, where Honie will have 2 minutes to have any final words before his execution, to the details and things going on outside where people have gathered to make their voices heard. But let's start with news specialist Andrew Adams. Andrew, you have been attending the hourly updates from prison correction officials. What's happening right now?
Well, this is our best understanding, Deanie, from what's been told to us. And keep in mind, we could get word at any minute that the sentence has been carried out. And so we're watching for that. But while we're waiting, let's back up a little bit and talk about what's been taking place over the last half hour. As you mentioned, Taberon Honie has been moved from his observation cell, where he's been since early this morning, and he's been moved into the death chamber. From what we understand of the process from there are crews that are basically strapping him into a chair, connecting the IVs, which are run from a different room. And this could be happening just as we speak, because we're not getting direct live updates from that death chamber. We'll get an indication when it has been carried out. But basically what we understand of the process is the curtains are pulled back. Honie is given the opportunity to offer some last words. And then once he has done that, there's a command given to basically execute him. Once that happens, then the drugs are pushed, the pentobarbital, and then all eyes are on an EKG machine. When there's no heartbeat, then the curtains close. His family members are then brought in to perform a spiritual ceremony, and then the medical examiner takes over before the media can come in and make its observations. So that is the process that is taking place here, perhaps as we speak, and over the next few minutes, as we're waiting for this execution to be carried out. But earlier in the evening, corrections officials spoke to us about just how much weight this whole entire process and the toll it has taken on the staff here at the Utah State Prison. Let's hear that right now.
The feeling is different this week. It's not something that anyone who's involved with this looks forward to or takes joy in by any means. However, we all see it as a responsibility of ours in the department, and we take it seriously, and we intend to carry it out in a caring and professional manner.
A bunch of witnesses for this execution between members of the media, government representatives, as well as representatives for the victim and for the condemned. Right now, we're in a position of waiting for an indication that that sentence has been, in fact, carried out. From what we've heard about, pentobarbital used in executions could possibly take up to 20 minutes, even if everything is administered properly. We are expected to get a little bit of a warning. So we're waiting for that right now. As soon as we hear it, we will bring it to you. Deanie.
Okay, Andrew, I can add one thing that we've seen from out here. The vans carrying what we presume are the witnesses left and went to the building behind me. That's the building where the execution is actually taking place tonight. Let's go now to the free speech zone, where demonstrators showed up to protest the execution. Daniel Woodruff is there now. Daniel, how many people are actually there tonight?
Yeah, Deanie, several dozen, I would say, have showed up here, and you can see just right behind me, they have been spending the last little while sharing thoughts about the death penalty, about what's happening tonight. They've been praying and other things as they await word that the execution has been carried out. They're all here to protest the death penalty and the fact that this execution is happening. I've talked with a number of people who traveled from outside Utah to do this, but I am also joined now by Janelle, who is from Layton, Utah. And you came out, Janelle, with a specific message. What is the message you're hoping to share tonight?
That we learn that this is not the answer. This execution is not going to deter anybody in the future, and it is a cruel punishment. I don't think this is right. And I really hope that the people of Utah do something about the laws to prevent this from happening again.
What about the family members of the victims who have some expressed a desire for this type of closure?
If that's what they feel they need, I really don't know what to say to them. I think it would have helped maybe if they could have just understood him more, understood why he did what he did. I don't know what I would do if it was a family member of mine.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective here. So we're here with a number of people protesting the death penalty and the execution being carried out tonight. Deanie?
All right, Daniel, thank you. Now, there is a process that corrections officials have been preparing for and following for weeks. They leave nothing to chance, and new specialist Daniela Rivera has been looking into the policies of Utah Corrections. Walk us through some of the things that have happened today and building up to this.
Absolutely. So something we know is rehearsals are mandated in policy, at least 3 rehearsals with members of each of these teams who have been selected to help carry out this execution. There's the transport team bringing him to the chamber, the tie-down team securing him in the gurney properly. There's the IV team. Their job is to establish the IV lines, and then the executioners, it is ultimately their job to push the drugs. There's also the Director of Prison Operations, Executive Director of the Department of Corrections, Brian Redd, is overseeing this process. The prison warden will be there. A physician will be there to watch his vitals and ultimately certify his death. So we know these rehearsals have been going on up until this evening was the 7th rehearsal that they carried out. 4 more than mandated by policy. Department of Corrections telling us they want to make sure they've planned for every type of scenario.
In fact, I found it interesting, the detail was that they wanted to get a stand-in, an employee who was the size of Honie so they could practice.
They did. They had someone stand in who was a similar height and weight to practice with these rehearsals. It's something that's been happening here in the weeks leading up to this, and as we now know, multiple times even today.
Okay. Daniela, we'll be checking back with you and get some more details in just a second, but we have all night wanted to make sure that we pay proper tribute to the life that's already been lost, the victim in all of this, which is Claudia Ben. KSL investigator Courtney Johns took a look at her legacy and the impact that she has left behind.
Claudia Ben's family has shied away from really any media coverage, but her family did speak at Taberon Honie's commutation hearing last month, sharing stories about the woman she was.
My aunt just wanted help.
A sense of service is something loved ones say was always a part of Claudia Marie Ben's life.
Claudia Ben had many titles. Number 1 was being a mother.
Born on June 19th, 1949, according to her obituary, Claudia grew up in Page, Arizona, got married in 1969, had 3 daughters before later divorcing, and then pursuing her college degree in the 80s. She got her associate's degree at Southern Utah State College in Cedar City and transferred to the University of Utah, majoring in sociology, during which she worked at the Women's Resource Center, helping other women further their education.
Because she was a mover and shaker, and she was a leader.
Claudia was a substance abuse counselor for the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, the vice chairwoman of the Shivwits Band of Paiutes, and the biggest fan of Tina Turner.
And now they're together up there, and she's rocking out up there in the high above heavens, you know?
But her greatest love was for her family.
She provided for me, taught me right from wrong.
Taking in loved ones when they needed a place to stay, she was a rock and a teacher to all.
She taught me to be proud of who I am and where I come from.
Lessons they will never forget.
And to always know my worth.
Coupled with memories that must now last a lifetime.
We had an Auntie and niece day for my 18th birthday.
As they dream of the life that could have been led.
If she was here, she would have been the best grandma ever, because she's the best woman.
The night Claudia was killed, she was babysitting her 3 grandchildren. Honie went into Claudia's home because Claudia was helping her daughter by letting her stay there. Back to you.
Courtney, thank you. Let's go back to the protest site. Debbie Worthen has talked to someone who is there who felt it was important that they take part in those demonstrations tonight. Debbie?
Right, Deanie, and what's really interesting here tonight is generally when we talk about a protest or a rally, it's loud, it's yelling, people are really rallying up the crowd. That is not the case here tonight. It is a very somber group here tonight. I'm with one man who came in from Ohio. He knows the Gardner family, and he has a personal tie to these types of situations in general. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tell me why you felt like it was important to come out.
Because I believe that all life is precious. No matter what you do. They had that gentleman incarcerated for 25 years, and I can't see why they couldn't have continued to incarcerate him. So it's like he's done 2 sentences. He's done a life sentence, and then they've turned around and executed him.
Your brother was on death row. Talk about that.
My brother was the face of the Violent Crime Bill 1994 when President Clinton came into Ohio. My brother was arrested. Here we're talking 32 years later, no evidence, no information, nothing whatsoever. And I've noticed that as I've gone throughout the United States, there are some that are guilty, but there's a vast majority of these guys that have innocent claims, and those innocent claims are not being heard. They're actually being executed. And we're talking, Minnesota, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma. I've been to all these states, and I've seen some stuff.
Ultimately, what would you like to see nationwide?
Nationwide, I'd like to see our country come together and show some love and stop killing one another. When I go to every church I go to, it says, "Thou shalt not kill," and it shows a picture of Jesus Christ up here on a cross, and yet we still come out and kill. And I just...
He has been with about 4 dozen protesters here tonight out near the Utah State Prison in this free speech zone. Deanie, back to you.
All right, Debbie, thank you. If you've been watching this broadcast on KSL TV, we are going to send you back to Olympic programming after a break. We are going to continue our coverage of the execution on our digital app, KSL Plus app, and you can continue to watch the coverage from there. We are now looking at about just 11 minutes after midnight and awaiting word that the execution has been carried out. We expect that to come any minute, but in the meantime, Daniela, we have been talking about there were last-minute pleas for leniency, trying to delay it even further, appealing to the governor even. A lot of those revolved around the drugs being used tonight. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So Utah law calls for a drug, sodium thiopental, to be used for executions, which is not available. It's not something the Department of Corrections could attain. And so the Department of Corrections began creating their own combination of drugs they thought would be an effective alternative. That was ketamine. That was potassium chloride, a 3-drug combo, fentanyl, a pain reliever. However, they knew that would get tied up in the courts. That was the subject of the litigation, Mr. Honie's lawsuit leading up to this point. He said that never tested combo, ketamine, has never been used in an execution. He said that could amount to cruel and unusual punishment. His attorneys actually pointed to the drug pentobarbital, which has been used in many executions, but is very hard to get.
And expensive.
And expensive, as we've learned. The Department of Corrections, as it turns out, was able to secure 3 doses of pentobarbital for a hefty price tag for taxpayers, $200,000 for those 3 doses. One is intended for Honie. There are 2 backup doses as well present here to carry out this lethal injection tonight. And we understand that their plans were shortly after midnight to give Honie his opportunity to say his last words and then to begin to administer a fatal dose of pentobarbital.
There is a process that they go through that is down to when they open the curtains. Walk us through what happens from here, or presumably what is even happening now.
Absolutely. So once the curtains are open for witnesses, according to this policy, the IV lines would have already been established. At that point, Honie is given exactly 2 minutes to make his final statements, remarks, if he wants to, and that is a firm 2 minutes. The policy calls for them to move forward, not to allow extra time to wrap up if someone is is still talking. Also, if foul language is used, the policy calls for them to move forward. And then at that point, there are certain things that must be verified. They will check that there are no last-minute legal challenges with the Attorney General. They will check that it is after midnight, and then the signal will be given to the executioners to begin to push those drugs. Now, after those have been administered, within 3 minutes, a physician will check Honie's vitals. If he is still alive, those checks will happen for every 60 seconds until the process is complete.
Not to be too morbid here, but there is also a process for what happens after he dies and passes away.
Yes. Honie has filled out a form with instructions what he would like to happen to his remains. We have learned that there will be a ceremony after he passes here. Department of Corrections officials have said they are accommodating that request, and they'll give us more information about that afterwards. And then ultimately the medical examiner will take custody of his remains. And another just thing to note, people who are executed are not eligible to donate organs.
Okay. We'll stand by here. Absolutely. We'll keep you posted. We're waiting any minute now to find out the status of that execution. But let's go back out to the free speech zone where Daniel Woodruff is. I would imagine the mood is pretty somber out there as well, Daniel.
It is really somber, Deanie. People are sitting and praying and talking with each other as they await word about what's happening at the prison just about a mile and a half down the road. And we're in the free speech zone that's been designated for people to come and share their views on any side of this issue. But the people we've met tonight have been protesting and speaking out against the death penalty. Michelle joins me. You're from here in Utah. Tell me a little bit about why you chose to come out tonight and what you hope people take away from tonight.
Honestly, I'd rather be in bed sleeping right now. I think it's pretty shady and nefarious to have state-sanctioned murder happen sometime after midnight. And the fact that this has to happen hidden, that they put this free speech zone in the middle of a field by an Amazon warehouse, it just seems very dystopian. And coming from Minnesota, where we don't have the death penalty, it felt something really distant, and now being here in a state that condones state-sanctioned murder is bizarre. It feels unreal. So I felt like I was obligated to be here and show my presence and show my opposition.
And your sign here says murder is never the solution. Clearly, a horrific crime was committed that led to this sentence, and a victim and families impacted forever. But talk about, your thoughts behind this, that a death penalty is not a solution to what happened.
Purely from a financial and economic perspective, it's egregious use of state resources, of time. The state of Utah spent $200,000 to just buy the injection that's going to put this man to death, and he could be serving life in prison. Simple solution that to me is more difficult than just dying.
Michelle, thank you for sharing your perspective. Appreciate it. So Michelle's one of dozens who have come out tonight to voice their opinion here in this designated zone away from the prison, and they're praying and talking and just, again, waiting for word of what's happening down the street where you are, Deanie, at the Utah State Correctional Facility.
All right, Daniel, thank you. It's an important perspective tonight. Now, we have one of the witnesses that is here tonight has been intimately involved in this process. He was the prosecuting attorney from the very beginning of this terrible case. News specialist Debbie Worthen is also at the free speech zone. And Debbie, he said something powerful. He said that this is not a case where the death penalty was given, but where it was earned.
Yeah, that's right, Deanie. And Scott Burns actually stopped by this area on his way into the prison tonight. He will be one of the witnesses. He's in there now, we presume. Now, he says tonight is not about celebrating. It is somber. And really, that's what we have seen out here this evening as well. But he also says it's about finishing something that was started 25 years ago. And tonight, he grieves with the family. He says he grieves for all of the lives that Claudia Ben was never able to touch. Think after 25 years, you would forget the small details of a case.
The facts of this case were just so horrific, so egregious, so brutal.
But for prosecuting attorney Scott Burns,
I don't think anyone that has been to a crime scene like that can wash away, the memory.
In fact, for years, Burns kept a picture of Claudia Benn's granddaughter on his desk at work. And he describes Ben.
She was just a vibrant, smart, witty, funny person.
At least that's what he learned about her when he prosecuted her killer, Taberon Honie. As the execution date comes, he believes Ben would have believed Honie deserved to die.
This is the ultimate penalty for what is, the ultimate crime.
Burns says the pictures from the scene, even presented in black and white to jurors, caused two of them to pass out. That's how gruesome the crime scene was. So on this night, he says this is the punishment that fits the crime.
This was a slaughter. This was just violence, unhinged.
Now, Burns drove through here earlier tonight, and then he actually quoted what the judge told him all those years ago. He said the judge, who he really appreciated and respected, said, if ever there were a death penalty case, this is it. Deanie?
All right, Debbie, those are powerful sentiments. We appreciate that. Thank you. Let's go back inside the prison to news specialist Andrew Adams. Andrew, you have been attending the hourly updates from prison officials. We were in there a bit ago as they took the witnesses from our area. Describe what's been going on in these hours leading up.
Well, Deanie, it has been a very detailed look into the final hours of Taberon Honie, and they've really given us a detailed step-by-step aspect of Honie's day from early this morning when he was taken to his observation cell around 6 in the morning to all the meetings he's had with family. It seems like one of the bigger take-homes was just how often he was meeting with family, and there were a variety of different family members, from his daughter to his mother to his father, sisters, I believe an aunt. And those people were all filing in. They could only visit him 2 at a time, but they were all rotating through and essentially spending time with him for the entirety, or almost the entirety, of his final day here at the prison. And we even had some insight into some things that he would say to them. Like at the end, we were told that he would say, keep your heads up. Was one of the messages there at the end. We were told about tears that were shared and some of the emotions that were shared. It sounds like he even deferred talking to his attorneys till as late as possible, just so he could spend a maximum amount of time with his family. We were given insight into his last meal, which obviously we've reported multiple times, as a cheeseburger, fries, and a shake. And also just about how he's carrying about his day. He was given a tablet, but he only listened to music at the very end of the day, we were told, when finally he had time alone to himself after all those meetings throughout the day. So we have been getting hour-by-hour updates on how his life, his final remaining hours of life, and how those have been going. And of course now we're just waiting for an update on how that life ended. And again, could be coming at any minute. Back to you, Deanie.
Okay, we'll be waiting for that 2-minute warning. Andrew, thank you. You know, the prosecutor said something interesting, and I want to bring in Daniela for this. He reflected on the fact that all this time that the family had gone and that Claudia Ben had not been able to touch other people's lives. You did an interesting figure today.
Well, we did the math, and we spent a lot of time talking about the hour by hour of what's happening on this one day. But once this is carried out, it will be a measure of justice from our system. 9,526 days from the day that Claudia Ben was murdered and taken from her family, her community, from this world.
It's a long time.
Absolutely.
To wait for this day. That signals 25 years on death row. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about why this happens at 12:01. A lot of people, we've seen it on social media, and they've been asking, why not do it earlier in the day?
We did ask that of Department of Corrections officials. The death warrant was signed for August 8th. They told us the reason they decided to do it right after midnight was simply because for this to happen, there's quite a bit of security that is involved, and the place goes into a lockdown, the whole prison system. and they felt this was the time that would have the least impact on the day-to-day operations of the prison. When you think about programming, educational classes, visits from family and inmates, all of those things would have to cease in the middle of the day to carry this out.
This is the most secure way to do it, certainly, and it allows them to keep this area at least secure, but still allowing employees and things like that to move freely on campus. Who is in there right now? We've got witnesses, we've got corrections officials. Describe that.
So we broke down the execution team, but there is a witness gallery, and so policy allows for 5 victim representatives and 5 people chosen by Honie. We know he chose 4 family members and 1 of his defense attorneys. We also know that the department allowed the victim representatives to have 7 people, and they did give that option to Honie. He stuck with the 5. So there are 7 victim representatives who are witnessing. There are 5 people there for Honie. There's also government witnesses. For example, the prosecutor. Policy also allows for 2 law enforcement officers from the county where this offense occurred. It allows for an attorney general or their designee. And then there are journalists. There are 7 journalist witnesses. One of those is our KSL.com colleague, Pat Reevy, who's in there as a journalist witness. Because as our duty as journalists is to bear witness to this process, to ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the way the government carries out this enormous act of authority and power when conducting an execution on the public's behalf.
It was interesting, just as they were called to go, summoned to go do their duty, they were read a pretty strict list of instructions and requirements and things that they could and could not take into the execution.
There can be absolutely no recording devices. In fact, the paper they had to sign informed them they would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. There's actually only 1 audio recording, and it is of his last words. And that is simply for the written record, so that we have an accurate record of what is said, and policy calls for that to be destroyed 24 hours after the execution.
A lot of policies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go now to Daniel Woodruff, who is in the free speech zone. But Daniel, earlier you had a chance to dig into Utah's death row and to look at some of the other members, other inmates who are there. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, there's a number of inmates on death row still, Deanie, at this point. That number continues to dwindle over time, and we haven't seen an execution here in Utah in over 14 years. Daniela earlier just barely was talking about the important journalistic responsibility of bearing witness to an execution, and earlier I had a chance to sit down with 2 KSL journalists who witnessed the last execution in this state more than 14 years ago.
When convicted murderer Ronnie Lee Gardner was shot to death by firing squad in 2010, longtime Utah journalists Pat Reevy,
it was the first time I'd seen a firing squad execution,
and Cheryl Worsley,
I think I'm changed after seeing something like that.
Watched it happen.
But I don't think I'll ever be the same.
When a prisoner is executed in Utah, some of those who witness it are reporters. When Gardner was put to death, Pat, now with KSL.com, was working for the Deseret News.
Ronnie Lee was...
Cheryl, who oversees KSL podcasts, was the news director at KSL News Radio.
You're performing the journalistic act of bearing witness to the execution, but how do you process personally watching someone be put to death?
That's a good question. I don't know that you fully process that.
The Gardner execution attracted a lot of publicity.
There's just more worldwide attention to a firing squad execution.
And it left an impression on those who witnessed it.
We were there probably, I don't know, less than a minute, and it just went boom, boom. It kind of was jarring. It caught me off guard.
Unlike that one, the upcoming execution of Taberon Honie will be carried out by lethal injection. Pat has witnessed one before.
It's less violent, I guess is the best word. It's more like almost a medical procedure where you see a person lying on a gurney with an IV attached to his arm.
You've seen an execution by firing squad. Is it something you would want to personally witness again?
I mean, for the sake of journalism, I would witness it.
I would not volunteer for it, but if it meant a seat was going to go empty, I would do it again, because we have an obligation. When the state conducts someone's death on our behalf, we need to be there to to tell how it's done.
Daniel Woodruff.
We're going to interrupt you, Daniel, because we just got the 2-minute warning, which means in 2 minutes they will confirm the execution is completed. Let's go to Andrew inside.
We will provide you with additional details at our press conference when the media witnesses return to this building, which should be in about an hour. Thank you.
Okay, so if you just heard, just barely as we dipped in, that the sentence has been carried out, there's going to be a full update, it sounds like, in about an hour. But again, the sentence has been carried out. That was just the update delivered just barely by corrections officials here in the area where they've been giving all the updates throughout the day.
Okay. Andrew, we appreciate that. It has been completed and carried out. That is confirmed. Daniela, there are some still process and steps that take place after this.
Yes, we know in a special circumstance here, they will be performing a religious ceremony that we'll learn more about later. And then the room will be cleaned. Honie's remains will be transferred to the medical examiner, and then the journalist witnesses who were in there, they will be allowed into the room once it is clean to document that scene. And then this will all culminate in a press conference later where we will hear from the state witnesses who were there, and we'll learn more about exactly how this was carried out, the time of death, and what Honie's last words were.
That's really the remaining thing, is to hear what his final words, if there was anything expressed to the family, to his family. Really the only thing that we don't know at this point.
Certainly.
Okay, well, this wraps up then our coverage and our first execution. All right, let's go back to Daniel out in the free speech zone, because we would like to hear what the reaction is there upon word that the execution has been carried out. Daniel?
Yeah, Deanie, so I haven't heard any announcement made yet, in fact, that it had been carried out. Beside what Andrew reported, nothing here at the free speech zone has been reported yet to people, so it's still quiet and fairly somber as people have been praying this evening and pondering and talking with each other and speaking out against the death penalty and what occurred this evening. So you can see, just as we kind of give you a look at the several dozen people who are still here holding signs and awaiting official word. So that official word has not trickled out here yet, but obviously we heard that announced by corrections officials that the execution of Taberon Honie has been carried out, but word has yet to reach those individuals here. So we'll wait for that. I'm sure reaction will be strong, as a lot of people really upset and troubled by what happened tonight and the carrying out of the death sentence for Taberon Honie. Back to you, Deanie.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. This is a day that has been a long time coming, 25 years since Taberon Honie was commuted to death, and tonight that has been carried out. We will continue to cover this. In an hour, we will get an update, as we reported, from the witnesses, from those who were inside. We will carry that on our KSL Plus app, and we will have all the updates on our KSL Today show in the morning. We'll see you in about an hour.